Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Monster Families. Today we're going to be looking at the Mega Demon. That's right, I bet you didn't know they were called Mega Demons. I bet you didn't know that the family name was Mega Demon. But yes, they are called Mega Demons, and that is what they are all called. There are many different variations of the Mega Demon. There is the Balrog, the Pit Lord, the Venom Lord. There is also the guest versions of those monsters, which are also the Balrog, the Pit Lord, and the Venom Lord. And the Venom Lord, actually, as far up till now, I've been checking the HP of every single monster and kind of keeping a mental note. And the highest so far that I've encountered is the council members at 22,400. However, look at this big chongus over here with 24,857 HP. Kind of explains why these guys are so ridiculously tanky all the time, and they're just really annoying to kill. However, this specific version is very restricted to Ventar the Unholy, which is the Act 5 wave of the Bale run. So when you fight Ventar the Unholy, he gets a bunch of minions, and they are the Venom Lord minions, and these Venom Lord minions can have 24,857 base HP, not including player count bonuses or anything else that could potentially occur to increase their HP, which is kind of nutty. So the Mega Lord, the Mega Demons, the Pit Lords, the Balrogs, the Venom Lords, they start to appear in Act 4. They're all over the place. You can find them in Chaos Sanctuary relatively easily. If you just walk into Chaos Sanctuary, you will encounter some Venom Lords with relative ease. They've always been a relatively annoying monster, in my opinion, because they are the type of monster that has just, for some reason, super tanky. On top of that, they also have many ways that they can potentially kill you. When they are extra fast, they can be particularly annoying. When I mean annoying, I mean very, very annoying. To the point where they can swarm you and kill you in a matter of seconds. Now, they're not always offensively a danger, but they are like the roadblocks of Diablo 2, I swear. Because whenever you have these guys in an area, they just take up huge amounts of space because of their size. They also have large amounts of HP and resistances, which usually ends up meaning that you can't bypass them as easily as you would like. So you have to spend time chunking them down. Some players have harder times with them than others, and we're going to go over their stats, and we're going to talk about why some people have harder times than others. The Mega Demon stats say these archetypal demons are spawned from the hottest fires of hell with no other purpose other than to act as a scourge to mortal souls. Towering over their lesser kin, their leathery wings and treacherous horns make them awesome sight to behold. Wielding jagged blades, they seek to hew limbs from their victims and bring bloody end to any who would oppose the might of their dark lords. Mega Demons have an Inferno attack that they use when they get within melee range. The Inferno is incredibly damaging, so high fire resistance and fire absorption gear offer some protection. Fight them at a distance whenever possible, or kill them as quickly as possible. Now, I take some affront to some of this. So first off, Inferno is incredibly damaging. No, it's really not. However, Inferno is probably one of the worst sorceress fire spells. In fact, I think it actually is like one of the worst sorceress fire spells. But the interesting thing is that in the translation between player HP and monster HP, Inferno's damage, which is absolutely terrible versus monsters, is actually pretty good versus players. And the reason why Inferno works so well versus players is because players have so much less HP than these monsters do. To put that in perspective, let's take a look at the HP of this particular monster, right? So a Mega Demon has between 9,555 and 15,167 HP. Well, if you take 15,167 HP and you divide that by an average player health of 1,500, you find out that the Mega Demons have roughly 10.1 times more HP than you do. Which means that Inferno, which does relatively no damage to monsters, can still do significantly high damage to players because you don't have as much HP as they do. Which oftentimes means that you will get absolutely wrecked by Inferno. even in hell difficulty, even with 75% fire resistance, you will find situations that will absolutely annihilate you. And this usually comes down to getting surrounded or having all of them use Inferno on you at the same time. In normal difficulty, you will get wrecked by Inferno. Because in normal difficulty, your HP is so low, we're talking like 100, 200, maybe 300 or 400 if you're lucky, like if you're a druid or a barbarian or something. But for the most part, most players don't even have that much HP in normal difficulty, and even with 75% fire resistance, you will often find that Inferno will absolutely clap your cheeks. It will melt your face clean off your body. And this is not the only monster in the game that uses Inferno either. In fact, earlier in the game, when you go to Act 3, you will encounter these stupid monsters, which are known as fetish shamans, and fetish shamans also use Inferno, and they will also melt your face. Thankfully, you get to find this out earlier in the game so that you know that Inferno is very bad. However, these guys are not melee fighters, so they don't often run into melee range to specifically use Inferno. You usually have to be stupid enough to run toward them to make that happen. However, Mega Demons are melee monsters, and they do run within melee range, and they will try to hit you immediately with Inferno if they have the ability to. And what I want to show you is I kind of want to show you that exactly. So one of the most fearsome monsters in the Mega Demon family is definitely the seal-popped monster right here. He always spawns with extra fast, and not only does he always spawn with extra fast, but they will synchronize. And this is where this becomes extremely deadly for those who don't know what's going on with this particular monster, because they will swarm you, and they will all use Inferno at the exact same time. This leads to a situation which will often mean your death, and very quickly. You click on this, you run up here, and as you can see, they run over, and all of them use Inferno at the exact same time. And this, if you do not have good fire resistance, maybe combined together with some absorption and a decent amount of HP, can potentially end your life. Now, look at my HP going up and down right now. Do you see my HP going up and down? This character is wearing one of the most broken pieces of equipment in the game, and they are still managing to make his HP shift like that. I want to show you the piece of equipment that I'm using that is allowing me to stay alive in this situation. Look at the crazy effing stats on this piece of gear, okay? All resistance is 205. Magic resistance. 127 fire absorption. MDR, PDR, 63 of all types, magic damage reduced by. They are still absolutely wrecking my HP to the point where if I don't drink some potions, I'm probably going to die. And if that doesn't express to you how ridiculously stupid the coordinated Inferno is that these particular monsters can apply, is absolutely silly. And of course, they also have fanaticism. They come with extra fast. And that's actually a really common way to die. If you are playing in a Chaos Sanctuary and you're standing in just the wrong spot when those particular monsters spawn, there is every possibility that you will die to them, because they'll swarm you and they'll kill you in a matter of seconds. And depending on the modifiers that they have, fanaticism, they always have extra fast, extra strong, cursed, and you know, if you have any other monsters around like casting amp or lower res or anything like that, can definitely make it even worse. And that's only if you're like really well geared, you might still die. If you're badly geared, the fire resistance, like if you don't have a decent amount of fire resistance, they'll probably just one-hit KO you with the Inferno. Wonder if I can even get my body back. No, no, no. Give my body. No, no. Ha. Now, Mega Demons have relatively high HP. If you look at some of the other monsters, like the council members, which have 22,000, you can see that even some of the lower HP monsters have upwards of 14,000 or 15,000 HP, and some of the guest versions have up to 24,857, which is absolutely bonkers. They also have 50% physical resistance in Hell difficulty. They don't have any physical resistance in normal or nightmare, though. They do have up to 39% block chance. I'm not entirely sure if that block chance is activated, and the Venom Lord versions in from Ventar the Holy say 50%. It's always a question whether or not the block chance is actually turned on or not, but they all have block chance stats, whether the block chance is turned on or not. But 50% physical resistance is already kind of tanky. They have 0 magic resistance. They have crazy fire res. In normal difficulty, they have 70% fire res, which is kind of unheard of, actually. Most monsters in normal difficulty don't have resistances that high, but the fire resistance of essentially all of the Balrogs in normal difficulty, even the guest versions, are 70% or higher. In Nightmare, they have 80% or higher, and in Hell difficulty, they are either immune to fire or they're very close to immune to fire. The only one that's not immune to fire specifically is the Venom Lord that spawns with Ventar the Holy, the Unholy, and he's 95%, which is still really freaking high. They don't have any cold resistance at all, so cold seems to be the better element for the guest monsters, and then the non-guest monster versions do have 50% cold res in Hell. And then they have lightning resistance in Hell difficulty too of 75%. It's kind of nutty when you put it all together, because this means that they have really good physical resistance, they have really good fire resistance, they have really good lightning resistance, they have decent cold resistance, and also, not only that, but they have pretty dang good poison resistance across the board. Some of them even being immune to poison in Nightmare difficulty, which, if you like just wrote that down as like a check mark, for instance, I mean, it's kind of nutty. So Mega Demons, like, let's just write down like fire, like Nightmare. We'll do only Hell difficulty, but it's still really impressive just to even do Hell difficulty. So fire 140, cold 50, poison, let's say at the bare minimum 50, physical 50. I mean, just looking at their stats across the board, it's nasty. They're just nasty all the way across the board. And lightning. Lightning 75. So they have no resistance lower than 50% and several resistances higher than 50%. And their HP is in the top tier essentially across the board. They have either very good HP or actually the best HP in the game of just about any monsters. And that might explain why, for some reason, the Mega Demons seem to be among like the most nasty monsters to deal with in general, because they're highly resistant to essentially all elements except for magic. And they also have some of the highest hit points in the game, and they actually have decent block chance too, which just makes them absolutely nasty monsters to fight. They also come with physical damage and an elemental attack, which, if you're not prepared for the Inferno, if you don't have enough fire res, if you don't have enough HP to absorb the attack, or fire absorption gear, or whatever hell's going on, you can very easily get smoked by the Inferno. So not only does he have a physical option, but he also has an elemental option. And some of the elite or super unique versions of these monsters are extremely difficult to deal with for certain characters. Take, for instance, this guy right here, which is extra fast, like fanaticized. Like, Melee absolutely hates this. Like, yeah, you could probably kill these guys with a caster, but even casters are going to have a little bit of trouble dealing with the extra fast behavior of them swarming on you and essentially killing you very quickly. And they can be deadly, very deadly. And I would assume that hardcore characters have probably died to this guy, specifically Infector of Souls, easily. Being extra fast every single time he spawns, and then also sometimes spawning directly on your head if you're not paying attention. Between him and Lord Decease, I would have to take a bet on which one has killed the most people. Lord Decease is close. I don't know. I'm not sure what you guys think, but put down in the comments which one you think kills more people on a like a monthly basis. Do you guys think Infector of Souls Seal Pops kills more people, or do you guys think that Lord Decease Seal Pops kill more people on a regular basis? It'd definitely be an interesting one to like vote on. There is another variation of these. It's not really something that's super important to talk about, but it is the Uber version. So when you go and you fight the Uber Diablo, not Uber Diablo, Pandemonium Diablo, Uber Mephisto, Uber Bale, and I also believe Uber Iswal, you will encounter a version of these mega demons which is immune to basically everything. The only element that they're not immune to is physical, as far as I'm aware, and they're really annoying. I mean, you can kill them if you have physical damage. You could break their resistances with sunders and things like that, but in general, they're just really annoying to deal with because they're immune to essentially like every single element in the game except for physical. They're not particularly like that difficult to deal with if you're a physical damage character, but being immune to every single element certainly doesn't make them the easiest monsters to kill. They spawn from Diablo as well, Pandemonium Diablo. So when you go into Uber Tristram and you go to fight Pandemonium Diablo, he will spawn the immune to everything except for physical mega demons on your head, which you can actually use them to stay alive if you have fire absorption because they love to cast Inferno. And by the time you get to this particular point in the game where you're fighting Ubers, you should be relatively well equipped for resistances. And adding in just a little bit of fire absorption can actually be enough to sustain you just simply by them spamming Inferno on you multiple times. It's pretty cool. Um, I think that's pretty much it with these guys. I don't like them. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. Like as far as monsters go, I feel like they're very damage spongy. They seem to have really high resistances, really high HP. They tend to be very difficult to kill until you're properly set up and you can bypass those resistances. Like, for instance, if you're a physical character and you have amplified damage, you can usually bypass their physical resistance, and then they're easy to kill. Or if you're a cold sorceress, you can bypass their cold resistances with things like Cold Mastery. But if you don't have a way to actively bypass their massive amount of resistances that they have, they literally just have really good resistances versus basically everybody. So until you start getting negative resistances, conviction, lower resistance, amplify damage, decrepify, etc., basically ways to bypass their defenses, they just tend to be really annoying, tanky, damage sponge type monsters. And then eventually, once you get your character set up properly, you have your appropriate, like weapons, amplify damage, you've got your negative resistances, your Griffin's Eye Diadem, your Crescent Moon, and all sorts of other things, then the resistances don't matter so much anymore. And like they tend to be relatively easy to kill. It's really that they're only difficult to kill when you're struggling on equipment at the time when you really don't need a monster to be super tanky. And then later on, when you're really, well geared and you would like some tanky monsters to fight, they tend to be much easier to kill because they're tanky in a way that you essentially bypass almost entirely, right? Another interesting thing about these guys, and it is one other thing that I would like to show off, is slow missile. So slow missile actually does work on Inferno, and it's actually a quirk of the game that I think is worth showing off here. So we have to talk about exactly how this works real quick before I show it to you. So in Diablo 2, things really don't have a range. So you would think that things have a range, but they don't really have a range. How Diablo 2 calculates range is it calculates range by using projectile speed plus duration, which is a pretty easy way to calculate range, right? So if I have a skill and the skill goes, say, 1 yard per second, right? And then the skill lasts for 3 seconds, then I should technically have a range of 3 yards, right? But the thing about Diablo 2 is that you can manipulate the projectile speed by using slow missiles, which then creates an odd situation where the ability doesn't go as far as it should during that same 3 seconds, and then you start manipulating the range of the ability with something like slow missiles. In the case of Inferno, if Inferno goes 1 yard per second and it lasts for 3 seconds, well, if I slow it down by 53%, then you take 53% and you go, okay, well, it's going 1 yard per second, so we go 1 minus, what is that, 47%, which means that now we have a ability that's going. Actually, it would be the opposite, right? So it would be 0.47, so 0.47 yards per second. So then we take 3 yards and we multiply that by 0.47, and we end up with only 1.41 yards instead of 3. And this actually works on Inferno. So if you find one of these monsters, and let's see if we can find one of these real quick so I can show you what I mean. You can cause them to use their Inferno ability at a much decreased range. So this is one of the monsters, for instance, and you can see that there's something wrong. Of course, I got this crazy character. You can see that there's something wrong with his Inferno, where it just doesn't seem to go as far as it did previously. And he can't even reach me with the Inferno. This is the silly thing. So the computer is trying to use the Inferno on me, but the Inferno isn't actually going far enough because the slow missile prevents it from reaching as far as it should. That's his normal Inferno. So let's look at the normal Inferno range, right? The normal Inferno range actually goes pretty far. And then if I use slow missiles on him, now his Inferno is going to be stunted, and he's going to have a little baby short Inferno. And this is due to the fact that the game calculates the distance of something by the projectile speed and the duration. And in this particular case, the Inferno is not lasting long enough, and it's not going fast enough to reach any significant distance when you slow missiles the Inferno. A lot of abilities in Diablo 2 work this way, in that the actual distance that the ability is capable of going is not an actual range, but more so a projectile speed plus duration equation. Which means that if you slow it down, you can very often reduce the overall distance that the ability is capable of traveling. And this kind of ruins Inferno and makes it very difficult to actually hit anything with it. As you can see, he's having trouble actually hitting me with the Inferno now because the Inferno doesn't go far enough to actually touch me. Whereas if he didn't have slow missiles on him, he would definitely hit me with the Inferno basically every single time. Now, granted, it doesn't do anything if you stand within melee range. So if you're standing within melee range and he uses Inferno on you, he's still going to hit you. So keep that in mind. And I think that's pretty much everything with these guys. There's really not a lot more to talk about with the Mega Demons. They're annoying. They're damage spongy. They're not like too difficult to kill once you have your character established. But early on in the game, they're definitely one of the monsters that just seems to absorb the most hurt and avoid dying the most, which makes them just annoying monsters to fight in general. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining. One thing I forgot to talk about. Revives. Do they make good revives? Yes, they do make good revives. Their damage is okay. Their physical damage is fine. They're not like Erdars or anything. But they do make good revives because their physical damage is fine. They also come with the Inferno, which, unfortunately, the Inferno doesn't really do very much damage at all versus monsters. So that's kind of a loss, but at least their physical damage is good. They're also a size 3 monster, so they work well for telestomping. Size 3 monsters generally tend to work extremely well for telestomping because they lock the other monsters in place. And they look cool with all the little wings pointing out everywhere. As always, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you enjoy the content. And as always, keep watching.